got a quorum, so we're good to go? Okay, Connor, are we good to go? Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October 24, 2024 meeting of the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority Finance Committee. Sylvette, can you call the roll, please?
John Hayes.
Here.
Paul Anthony. Ann Baum. Robert Brooks. Larry Hemberger. Ricky Gower.
Here.
Michael Sturczyk.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And we have
No public comment.
Mr. Reed, no public comment. Okay, perfect. Okay, action items on the agenda today: approval of the meeting minutes of September 26, 2024. They were posted via Novus Agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Mike, second by Ricky. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to said minutes? Nope. Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, acceptance of the financial statements for September 2024. Todd, you are up.
Good morning, all. For the third quarter. Traffic, in case you didn't realize it, over the last 12 months, we did hit the 1 million passenger mark. On a pretty good course for this year. You can see this is our best year to date since '04. And in case you're counting, that was the last time we hit 1 million in a calendar year. Just kind of looking at it, always nice to see what was at the very bottom there, that COVID. Seems like it was not that long ago, but obviously we've moved on from there. Comparing ourselves to all U.S. airports, again, the seats, we are pretty consistent, 7.5 to 7.5, but our throughput is really what is driving our traffic, because the seats we are using, you can see it's more than double the seats. Kind of the same thing here as far as peer average, although that seems to be up a little up and down, 7.5, a little bit higher than the peer average as far as seats, but again, throughput more than double the peer average. Then for the month of September, we had a budgeted number of a negative 295,000. We had a positive of 76K. Had a good month. Keep in mind that we are still accruing. As we get to the end of the year, I think it's important to remind people that we do accrue for potential settlement. So we have about 400,000 in there now, built into our settlement. That's built in. That revenue has been reduced by 400,000 to account for the potential settlement. And then we're also accruing for the GASB one-on-one, which is about 500,000. That's 100,000 that we started accruing last month. So we'll keep accruing that each and every month until the end of the year. But even with those adjustments, we're still positive 76K. Hey, Justin.
How are you?
You snuck in on me, huh?
That's right.
Okay. Year to date, again, looking at that number without CARES, next year is our last year as far as CARES, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can see that we're positive without CARES, which is something we'll keep an eye on, because obviously in 2026, there'll be no CARES.
If I can interrupt you for 1 second. Sylvette, who joined us online? I've heard the bell go off a couple of times.
Christopher Worley.
We got Chris and we got Bobby. Okay.
Morning, gentlemen. Again, doing well as far as net income. I think we do a great job of managing our expenses. And, one of the things that we did do, we'll talk about this a little later in our settlement, but, when we do our budget, we kind of close it as more max number when we go to the airline, so that way we can pull it back as opposed to asking for more money at the end. So the fact that we have a positive variance is a good thing. Well, we got the whole gang's all here.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, John, how are you? And I know this is Frank's favorite chart. But this is a good one, because it kind of says for each month we've had positive net income without CARES and without miscellaneous income. And last year we had 11 out of the 12 months, and in 2019 we had 11 out of the 12 months. So we're 9 for 9 so far, and maybe we'll go 12 for 12, which will be fantastic. Looking at our profit centers, again, the top two, parking and CARES, but I wanted to highlight those two on the bottom there. I always talk about, in quotations, you hear me say, it's supposed to be break even. I do that all the time. It's supposed to be 10 and 11, it really highlights the subsidies that we do give to the airlines to make our rates competitive. That is something that we do, that we have to do to kind of keep our rates to the point where they keep us in the ballpark. But if we didn't have to do that, obviously, we would have a lot more resources at our disposal. Again, breaking it down, what the biggest variances are. Biggest one is probably benefits as part of personnel. And one of the big variances is the medical, and that rebate that we got was better than what we put in the budget for last year. That was probably $300,000-$400,000. Half of that is probably due to that right there. And then seeing here, when you're talking about, what are we talking about here? Personnel costs. Still, we have some room in our budget. We're not quite as budget. We're 7% below budget, but still 13% up from last year. Pretty significant number. Non-personnel up 6%. Again, we had some of that stuff was kind of pushed back and some of the timing, but still up 6% from where we were last year. So those are still pretty robust numbers compared to last year. Obviously, we gave ourselves some margin with the budget, but again, those are up pretty significantly. And kind of seeing we are as far as year to date, breaking it down, and then breaking it down by department. You know, that's Justin's favorite. Everybody has a favorite chart. And then,
Is that your favorite?
and then we go here, and this is just our 6 month. And John and Frank, we always have our pre-meeting, and the one we talked about a little bit more was line 10. And John made a great point that said that doesn't include any additional revenues and some of the things there. But at this point, it's just for us to keep our eye on the fact that's something we're potentially going to have to pay for. Obviously, it's not a real number. We're not going to pay it. But we've done this in the past, kind of preparing for the fact that we're going to have to pay some additional debt service. Two things that are kind of keep in mind for next year. Not only are we talking about some additional extra financing, we're talking about refinancing. So we're not sure where that's going to land.
No.
So at this point, we're just saying, hey, think of it as at least $100,000, and we might have to pay, and start thinking about what would that mean if we had to pay that now. Again, just something to think about.
Yeah, so again, that's not a real number. It's not something we're paying currently, and it does not include any additional potential revenue from the parking deck.
Correct.
So there's nothing on the other side. So that's about as conservative as you can get, and it's to basically evaluate our ability to afford it.
Right. Correct. You said a key phrase. Conservative as you can get.
Yep.
I am Mr. Conservative, so I don't know what else to tell you. Again, kind of seeing some of the changes in front of our capital, and that's just some of the timing. You can see line 22 there where we moved the CARES back. We originally had some CARES that we were going to take in November. That's been taken out, and that's all going to be in 2025. Breaking down some of the changes, again, our early number, we'll talk about that later when we talk about the budget, is about $77,500. We'll get a better feel for that probably in the next week or so. But that's where we are right now as far as next year, as far as the cash on hand with cost per day. And then breaking it down based on that new number at 77.5, you can kind of see what it is based on our new chart of our 180 days total reserve. And you can see that that number is going to be a little lower because we have that 100K in there each and every month that you might not have caught that's built into these numbers.
Yeah, that would have accounted for about 1.4 million in cash, I think. It was 2 months in 24 and all of 25.
Good math. You must be a banker.
Is CARES in that chart?
CARES would be in this chart, yes, because we're going to have some of that in there during that 12-month period, yes. Any questions? Again, we had, go ahead, Frank.
No, we discussed on the call, we're gonna use our CARES money through 2025. And the plan is to use it on one-time expenses,
Correct.
right?
Correct. And I'll talk about that more when we go through the budget stuff, but that's a great point because, you saw we have about $4 million of subsidies easily that were given to the airlines. And we have to keep that there to stay in the ballpark, to be competitive. I mean, it'd be nice if we could just say, hey, we're going to charge you $4, but unfortunately, we have to keep it there to keep us in the ballpark. And so we can't take that away, and it's really about these one-time expenses. And we've been very strategic about it. As you remember, some of us, when we talked about the CARES, take it all at once. No, we strategically mapped it out. And even this year, if you think about it, we had 2.7 in this year, and we didn't spend it on this year. We pushed it back again, but some of that's the timing, some of our demolition. But again, we've been very strategic about it. we are prepared for post-CARES era. I'm going to say that again. We are prepared for the post-CARES era.
Anyone have any additional questions for Todd? Good. Entertain a motion to accept the September 24 financial statements.
This time.
Okay, motion by Ricky, second by Mike. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Todd, thank you, and we'll go right into the discussion points, which have to do with the operating budget and the capital improvement planning process.
All right, and this for folks that haven't had the pleasure of hearing these exciting budget presentations. I know John's probably had like 5,000 of these by now, but
You're rounding down.
You're saying exciting.
thanks for rounding it down.
Did you say exciting?
Yeah, I did say exciting. Try to contain that enthusiasm. But we do one now, and this is kind of where we are now, and then we have the final one we do next month. But we're probably about 95% there as far as where we think we are, and just to give you a feel for where we are. So you'll hear it again, but just to kind of give you an idea. And some of this stuff is consistent from what we've done in previous years. Always start out with the basics. Operating budget, we want to be financially responsible. Strategic vision, down there at the bottom, again, we are prepared for the post-CARES era. We got it in bold there, we got a little line there, we are prepared, and outline our expectations. So again, because a budget is really, what's our plan? So we all have to be on the same page as far as what that plan is. Employee, staff, board, et cetera. For 2025, again, we're going to continue to manage our resources, keeping our eye on a long-term plan. Again, really focus on that debt service, and you see it there again, without the one-time and incremental expenses. Because again, that leverage is not stuff we're going to be able to carry in 2026 because there won't be any CARES. And then always continue to invest in the big three: organization, people, and infrastructure. Then breaking it down, I always start off with the revenue-based budget. John remembers the days when we had expense-based budget. That was not fun. We've grown since then. I can sleep a lot better. But again, you can see now again that residual 2.4 in there for ARPA. That's the last of the CARES. Kind of our assumptions as far as operations. You can see they're up some from where they are this year and where we were in previous years. Again, talking about our employments, we're at 519. And about 58% of that is Allegiant. Again, that Allegiant percentage is pretty high. We've kind of went up from a few years ago, but it's a big part of our base here, a big part of our traffic. Talking about, at this point, we have 4% in there for, it's really about 3% for landing and about 5% for terminal. We'll get a better feel for that once we go through the final rates and charges with our consultants. 6% is built in there because we do have the increase that we just put through in the parking lot. And all of our other stuff is per the agreements.
In terms of the bus traffic, there have been several articles over the last couple of months with American expanding bus traffic to other airports. Are there any discussions, are they thinking about adding additional bus traffic for us, or do we have what we have for the time being?
I think what we have is really good service in terms of connectivity with the 5 round trips a day on American to Philadelphia. We have 3 with United going over to Newark.
Yep.
I don't anticipate seeing big changes to that service level.
Okay.
But it provides great connectivity to those hubs.
I heard great comments. People that I've talked to have taken
The
it.
challenge we've always talked about is, from an FAA perspective, those travelers don't count to our passenger counts. So that's a little bit disappointing, but that's really based on how the FAA defines an enplanement.
Yep.
So that would take some changes in legislation and things. So
If the bus offerings increased, it would be frequency to where we're already going, or would we
I think so.
add,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Right now, we see American and United in that landline bus business, and that makes perfect sense based on our location to proximity to Philadelphia and Newark.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't think there'd be a logical other connection per se for us.
You're down in the DC area, but that's far enough for a flight.
Right.
Oh, and one other thing. the FAA on Tuesday approved vertical takeoff and landing electric aircraft.
Yes,
Colin and I were talking about that. That's going to be entertaining.
yeah. It's coming.
Yeah, it is. That it is.
Like it's a
Kind of
big
breaking
drone.
it.
I'm sorry?
A big drone.
Pretty much.
Could have charging stations out on the.
We have one.
In the air. Charging station in the air.
Yeah, yeah. Wireless.
And it's talking about where we are. I always focus on the hours. Sometimes we focus on the employees. But you can really see that's why I always focus on that kind of full FTEs, which is full-time equivalents. And that's based on 40 hours a week. But you get a perfect idea. Look at the last payroll. You can see we had 493,000 hours, but we only had 297. So we actually had more hours with less people. So some of that's overtime, some of that's more part-time hours. But again, the hours are the hours. It's just kind of how you manage them. So sometimes employees get lost, but it's really about the hours when I look at it and how we manage our business.
So Tom, would it cost less to have more employees than to pay overtime?
It depends. There is a tipping point. There is a tipping point, and depends on how that works. Right? So yes, we do those metrics all the time. I don't want anybody talking about my overtime stuff that I send them every. Okay, no, we don't like that. They get all excited about that too. That's one thing that they all look at them all excited now. And this is just kind of breaking them down again by department. And then again, we have our CBAs, which are following. At this point, we got 3% built in there for non-union, which was consistent with most of the other CBAs. We have all of our stuff is in there. We always put in that, I should say, next year we have the 1% bonus pool built in there, and that's built in December. It's just kind of a placeholder in case, that's what we put in there. Obviously, it's used to pay Christmas stuff if we're in a position to do that. But if we're not, it would just be extra fat. So just kind of putting in there is a little cushion, but obviously it's only in December. And then we built in there I think I was supposed to change this to 33. Steve told me to change it to 33 inches, but it's not 32 anymore. But we built it up based on the average that we've had on our snow events. And again, depending on how that goes, we've had a few when we've had less. It's never exactly what we expect. It's either better or worse. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, right, Steve?
When you budget for snow, how do you do that?
We just base it on what the average has been as far as overtime and snow rate, because there's a premium that we pay for snow. So we base it on kind of the average winter. For us, one of the things that's key is less snow, more events could be more costly.
Right. It's
So-
less events.
Right.
No events.
So more events are more costly than big events.
132-inch snowfall.
Getting things up and everything.
Well,
else.
you would think an inch of snow would be less costly than.
But you gotta bring everything out for
We
it.
had that conversation
Right.
earlier that,
It's the kind of getting right.
depending on when that snow flies and what time period it operates, I always say it never snows between Monday and Friday from 8 to 5. So, it's right away in off hours and days. So it just depends. It just depends, weather-wise. The joke here is that you push the same flake around the parking lot 20 days in a row because as cars leave and come and go, this isn't, a grocery store where the cars leave at the end of the day. People are in there all day. Snow melts. Overnight it refreezes. We're back out there cleaning up ice and moving
Right.
stuff again. So people clean off their car. It spills off, slides off the roof of the car back into the lane. So we spend a lot of time sometimes cleaning up a small event.
The reason I was, asking for a couple of reasons, but one of them is the projection for this year is winter's gonna really suck. Not to like.
You're going to hear from Steve a little later on that.
So the projection for me this year is winter's gonna really suck. Okay.
How many years factor into the average are you assuming?
So this goes back to.
It's provided by the National Weather Service. If you go to their past weather for snowfall events, the average for this area is, and we just,
Updated
for some reason it bumped up an inch, but in reality, the last 3 years, we haven't met that
The last few is-
amount.
No.
But to Tom's point, we had 2 snowstorms last year that were 2 inches, that it snowed 2 inches over 36 hours. So our entire maintenance staff covered that snowfall for 36 hours and swept up 1.5 inches of snow. And then we had a a 9-inch snowstorm, it was 40 degrees the next day. We plowed that off and we're gone in 10 hours. So it's,
What's the ratio of parking lot and roadways versus runways expense for snow removal?
well, we have more people in the air side, but we also have contractors assisting with
Inside
the
areas.
inside. So it's,
Is it 50/50? Does one
In
cost?
terms
I
of,
gotta look
in
at it.
terms of the cost, you mean?
In terms of the
Cost, we could look at that.
yeah,
We
it's
could do a
curious.
breakdown. In general, what it becomes.
And what will a parking garage, how will that affect?
So you don't have to worry about snow.
Less. You still have a roof and a.
Don't park on the top.
Top
Yeah,
shelf.
it does certainly help, but, you know, we'll still have surface lot available, so, probably won't change dramatically. But, yeah,
Todd and I were looking at just the maintenance department's hours per inch, and it ranges from 64 hours per inch to up to over 100 hours per inch.
Total hours.
Depending on.
So if we get, you can do the math, if we get 4 inches, it's
right,
400.
and that's just our maintenance
Just our
department's hours.
maintenance department.
Not the materials and everything else.
That doesn't
Not
include
the contracts, right,
ops,
nothing.
management, all that other stuff. So.
Right, but to answer Elizabeth's question, I think it's a rolling 10-year average, Elizabeth, that we use to get the average from the weather service. So it's the last 10 years is 33.
Thank you.
All right. We good on the snow?
No, I understand now how you do it.
All right, we ended up with a 9% on our medical. We ended up with a 9% increase on our medical. Still the same plans, that nothing really changed. Contributions for non-union went up, consistent with what we've done with all the union contracts. Just to give you an idea, family pays about $98 a pay period for non-union, which is consistent with the unions pay. Everybody's right around the same rate, within a couple of dollars of everybody. We used a blend for new hires between single and family. I think we use a 50-50, half for single and half for family. Zero on the dental and the vision. We used an estimated 2%. That's a placeholder at 2%. The only time that we've actually spent more than 2% was during COVID. Normally, we don't spend 2% of our payroll on unemployment. We just don't spend that much. But, that's a reasonable number to hold. We can't hold what we actually charge because it would be too aggressive. So, and then zero, we're not 100% sure on the workers' comp, but that's the early number that they've given us. This is when we talk about on the medical, and that's what I'm talking about on that surplus. So last year, I think we budgeted, I believe it was $100K that we put in for the 2024 budget. The final number came in at 482. So that means that we actually had 382 more of the negative expense, because what happens is we pay the full amount and then they give us a rebate, and then we show that as a negative expense the next year. So we assumed 100, but we got 482. So that was 382 to the good that helped us this year. But obviously, you don't know. So, at this point, I put in 50 through June. And through June, we were at 81. I think we're trending a little higher at this point, but that was through June. So you just don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. So that's a big part. Pension number used to be 10. Now it's closer to 11. Probably at some point it'll be 12, but that seems to be going up on there as far as the contributions. A balanced budget, we're showing about 675 of net income. Without CARES, about 1.7 in the whole. Again, that includes a lot of one-time expenses. You can see that on number 3 there. I did change it here, 33 inches. I didn't change the other one to 32. So this kind of, again, those are one-time expenses. So if you think about it, next year when we take those out, we'll probably be starting right around the 675 without the one-time expenses that we have in there now. So again, our goal as the authorities to kind of eat what we kill, to obviously be self-sustaining, but our goal is not to make as much profit as possible. We just want to be self-sustaining. So 675, obviously some businesses would say that's pretty minuscule, but for us, we're just trying to kind of, be self-sufficient. And this is kind of breaking down our early estimates of where we are as far as rates. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, just talking about some of the subsidies that we've used. When we've said it's been ARPA, but also overall, it's a pretty significant, over $4 million of subsidies that we put into the rate base to keep them competitive. And we're still high, even with the subsidy. So that's always something, we have this debate every year with our consultants. You know you can charge them more. Yeah. That doesn't mean they're gonna pay, but we certainly we can charge them more. And this is kind of breaking down the big expenses, the kind of, for next year, the non-personnel ones. The contract stuff is some of the demolition that Ryan will talk about at some point. Fuel, everything's going up. You saw it really on the dues and subscriptions. That is all of our Microsoft, our licensing, everything's going up. It's just what it's going up. It's just every software that we use is going up some ridiculous amount of money, and unfortunately, you gotta pay. Nothing else we can do. We need the services, and breaking down everything else is kind of going up accordingly. My favorite down there, number 9, payment in lieu, our percentage that we pay on our parking. I won't talk about it more. And this is kind of talking about really what we talked about before that. We kind of.
If we could double back to that for 1 second. The pilot includes what we pay to Allentown for the egregious stormwater tax?
No,
Oh, that's separate.
That's not that.
Okay. And how much have we paid into that so far?
I think we did it for.
Gotta be 5 or 6 years.
4 years now?
4?
4, yes, at least 4. Yeah,
I thought it would have been more.
yeah, I think it's
Possible
4.
we've gotten
It's either
something
4 or
there,
5.
So 300 grand, is it more than that?
It's easily 300 grand, yeah.
Right,
78,000.
70, 80 year?
78 a year.
Yeah. And then this is kind of what we were talking about, this kind of thinking about where we are as we start preparing for the post CARES era. And, you know, when we had our budget in 2021, we did that amendment in August. That was kind of, let's go catch up. Because obviously we had scaled back on COVID, and then 2021, our budget was kind of reflective of the fact that we were still in the COVID era, but we had recovered somewhat. So it was kind of like, go get them. We upped our budget in 2021. And to kind of get to where we wanted to be now, and this is just kind of saying, you know, from 2019, what's changed versus 2021. So, you know, the big one up there is, you know, passengers are up about 11% from 2018, but 35% is 2021. You can kind of see the total revenues there. 33% since 2021, but only 40% since 2019. You can kind of see all this up there. And you can kind of see, we always kind of talk about the big 3 people and infrastructure. But again, you can see here that we do those things. You can look down there at depreciation. That is our continued investment in infrastructure. And employee benefits, something that we've taken a lot of pride in and take really good care of our folks. That's went up significantly since 2021, but even 45% is there. And you can kind of see also there, so the average cost for payroll is went up 24% versus 2018, but 17%. Okay, but then you can also see that our hours have went up as well. So when you start rolling them down there, you can see payroll hours. So you have to put them together, and you start hitting you hard with some of the, you know, workman's comp and unemployment and all those things that are based on a percentage, and those things start to add up. And you can see down there, that's the numbers that we focus on. We got the 2 bankers in here that tells us that's our ability to pay our debt. That's the cash that comes from our operations. And that's kind of what folks will be looking at when we talk about new debt. How much can you afford? And it's going to be those numbers down there. And this is kind of talking about that road of care. So we had about $18 million. Doesn't seem like we got that much, does it? Where did it go? But we got $18 million, and we strategically spent it each and every year. And now next year will be the last year, 2.4, a little over 2.4. So again, we were very strategic about how we used it. We had some early conversations about using it all early. That was a non-starter, and we did it the right way, and that's why we're still using it in 2025. Where, you know, Tom was really excited about the demolition. He looked out and said, you know how long we've been trying to do that? We never had the money to do that, and we were able to do that. So that's things that we would have not had the opportunity to do had we not been strategic, because those are one-time expenses. And that's why, and somebody actually asked me if you can depreciate demolition. I almost fell on the floor, but I was like, no, you can't, there's nothing there when you're done. But it's a big number, you'll be like to appreciate it, but we can't. So it's nice to be able to pay for some of these things that are necessary, and we've used it strategically, and those are kind of the things we've used some of that CARES for. And this is kind of our cash flow pushed out. I think I showed the same one in our financials. But again, this kind of showing us staying above that 180 total number throughout to the end of December of next year, based on our early estimate. Well, the final number soon. Any questions?
Back up one slide, 77.5 per day in estimated expenses. That was 55 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, it was definitely went up.
I remember we talked about that a couple of months ago, but
It definitely went up.
yeah, operating cost increases over the last few years reflect in that number very directly.
Yeah, it is. Now, keep in mind, some of that is built in there with some of the CARES. So those one-time expenses are built into that 77.5. So hopefully it'll come down some next year, but well, it never comes down, but not go up as fast is probably the right answer.
Prices never go down.
Yeah. So any questions? Again, I'll go through this again next month, but you kind of get a feel for where we are again. We're going to have a balanced budget. We're not going to make a ton of money, but we're going to be able to take care of ourselves.
Open up the floor for questions.
Any questions, concerns? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Okay, Ryan, you're up on capital improvement planning update.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. All right, so kind of dovetailing on some of what Todd mentioned. Again, some of you may have seen this last year, but just kind of a brief update, how we kind of have a method to the madness, so to speak, with a lot of our projects, but here's some of the items that we'll kind of get through. So another busy year. We did over about 60 major, or not major projects, but departmental projects, equipment, other components. These are kind of some of the big ones that we've talked about, committees, with obviously the connector tunnel, runway packages, boarding bridges, some of the ones obviously we're working through now. So just kind of a quick recap. Obviously the tunnel was the last piece of the connector that we finished the earlier part of the year. The 1533 lighting, they're basically just wrapping that up now. The vault's actually been delivered, working with PPL to get that energized. All the lighting has been put in. Obviously the year before we did the paving. Runway program, again, the big thing was this new taxiway connector for package 4, a lot of the other drainage, continuing with the shoulder improvements as we've talked about. 2 new boarding bridges, that was a big one as well, replacing the old Bridge 2 or Bridge 3, now Bridge 2, and then Bridge 10. These are ones that we completed earlier in the year, and then the other one we're in the process of doing over the next month. Like we talked about, the Hangar 7 entrance road, vehicle service road in the bottom left, and then the concrete repairs that was in pretty rough shape that we were able to get to earlier this year as well. Talked about some of the demolition, some of the smaller, but still pretty substantial areas, some outlying properties, an old AHU, and then the elevator escalators as part of the tunnel project. So going back a little bit, kind of, to Todd's point again about investing in infrastructure, looking back over the last 9 years, you can see LNAA share is the blue, FAA state funding is the green. You can kind of see we're typically in that mid to maybe as low as 20% LNAA funded, but kind of see the yellow line in the middle or orange line. Basically, all the numbers in the cash flow that Todd showed has some of the assumptions we have here of basically over the last couple of years, but looking around 14.1 at this point estimated LNAA share for some of the projects that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But
What project did we do back in 2017 that required such a large contribution on our part?
so that one I believe was Hangar 11. Yep, because I was kind of looking back, and that was probably the biggest one.
Okay.
Yep, good question. So looking back, because I think we opened that right at the beginning of 2020.
Yep, during the pandemic.
So you can kind of see on the right, again, over the 9 years, we spent $208 million on capital, and actually about $84 million of that was our share. And again, it includes Hangar 11, the connector, some of these bigger projects that we obviously got some financing for. So touching a little bit of how we get to the projects that we talk about on a monthly basis, kind of taking a step back in 2019, we updated our airport master plan update, and that looks at forecasts of demand, what do we need as a facility to meet that demand, and then what we actually need is then shown on a plan in terms of the projects to depict what needs to be done. And then we look at those and start working through priorities and phasing and timing. And a lot of these, again, is working as a staff and with our consultants about identifying grant funding opportunities for those projects, phasing them appropriately with design and other elements. So we've updated some of the graphics that I'll show in a minute, but basically you got three categories with the different colors when you talk about projects. You got maintaining our existing infrastructure that we need to continue our business and operation. As I mentioned with the master plan, you have projects to accommodate forecast and demand and the growth, whether that's cargo, air service, parking growth, and then generating additional revenue like we've talked about from non-aeronautical or even aeronautical development as part of that. So again, we kind of talked about some of the grant pieces, single-year, multi-year projects, kind of working through those. So here's kind of a snippet from our master plan, really which is developing the airport layout plan, which is what you see here, which is what the FAA requires to show all our project. But you can see phase 1 and 2, you can see the numbers, and we talk about the last 9 years, we're up 208 million. So we're in the range of what we've been projecting. So between phase 1 and 2, there are about 14 projects that were listed. We've either completed or in the process of working on 8 of those. You can kind of see the breakdown, some of the things we talked about, connector, hangar 11, working on cargo that we're talking about, some taxiway work. So this is really the updated graphic with really the next 8-year projection. Again, that changes based on timing, demand, cash, obviously, as we work through potential funding. But again, you can see up top the number. Again, it's right around the range of what we were talking about before. Over the next 8 years, 225 million, roughly 60 million of LNAA share. But the big things we'll kind of talk about a little bit later with some of the projects, but we have terminal modernization, we have the Air Handler Unit 4 project that was approved, that we're working to get started on. We got inclusion of the parking garage, the government building demo, rehabilitating the Hangar 7 apron doors. It's a pretty big one to kind of talk about. Then obviously you see cargo on the north side, as well as working on some design for replacing the maintenance facility fuel tank. So kind of the whole gambit, but you can see the orange, the teal, light blue, and then the pink, purple with those different elements kind of what we talked about.
You go back up for 1 second, Ryan. Separate question, but I see in the upper right-hand side by the Northside Logistics, we still have general aviation aircraft based here?
Yes.
Okay. Are we still trying to transition them to the other two, or have we transitioned everyone we can?
No, at this point, I always think we have 3 different product offerings between the airports, so it just depends what level of service people are looking for in terms of where they want to base their airplane and what services they want. With ILS approaches and all the snow removal efforts here, some people might really think of that as a premium service and
they'll pay for it.
pay to be here for that.
Okay.
And others don't need that, so they base at another location.
Okay, thank you.
So moving to Queen City, same process. Airport layout plan updated back in 2021. You can see some of the projects there that we've completed or in the process of doing. Same thing, updating this. We've talked about 1533, paving and the lighting. We've also talked about the Taxiway Alpha feasibility study, rehabilitation that we're working on currently. We're showing it if the FAA says you need to shift it by 40 feet, that's basically where it would be. Again, it's not much, but that's what we're working through now. Again, fuel farm, apron markings. You see the cost there as well, kind of in line with what we've been doing. And again, Braden, same thing. So Braden is only a PennDOT funded airport. You don't get FAA funding for that. So we don't have an airport layout plan, but we really just have a preferred development plan that we work through with them. Same process. And again, still making some improvements there. We had the terminal building a couple years back, and then we've talked about the 1836 lighting that we got state funding for, $975,000 that we're working through now as well. So all that said, when you take those projects and then bake them into some of the departmental needs with some equipment and vehicles and other things. We kind of look at what needs to be included. We look at contingencies to make sure we're covered around 10%, knowing we're just using estimates for some of the projects as we get them started. And then next month, when we actually look at some of the equipment, we'll kind of use that same scale with prioritizing some of the equipment needs. So again, most of these projects shouldn't be surprises. They're ones we've really been talking about in the business committee. But the thing to kind of hit on is similar to CARES. We've also been looking at the bill funding, which we've talked a little bit about, the bipartisan infrastructure law. So it's similar to CARES, but it's for infrastructure, not some of the one-time expenses. So you can see ABE is basically entitled to $17.8 million. We have about 13.6 left. Really, we got, I think it was 4.6 or 4.8 for taxiway alpha that we talked about a couple months ago. And then Queen City actually gets 1.47 million, and we've used some of that for the 1533 project. So you can see we have a 780,000 left there as well. So in terms of what we're looking for next year, continuing forward with the runway project, the taxiway delta, which is for cargo. The other piece that we're working in here that we'll probably talk more about next month is the, kind of see the 3C right there, the infra grant, Northside Logistics and Cargo Complex. So there's some components that we have to fund and work through, but there's also some of the developer we're working with to do some of that funding as well. So that plays in there. And you can see, kind of broken it out, there's, more than 7 grants, but there's really 7 major projects that we're talking about, and each has a different subset. So once we start going through, we'll kind of track that similar to like what we're doing with the connector project. And you can see the 2 projects we talked about, Queen City and Bray. So then kind of go into the major non-grant projects, which we talked about. Again, those align with the strategic vision we've been talking about and the graphic that we mentioned. So again, the ones up top are in progress: terminal modernization, government building, air handler unit 4, and then some of the other ones we've talked about with, again, evaluating the parking structure, main facility fuel tanks, miscellaneous air side and land side paving. So working through that. And I mentioned the hangar 7 door as well. So again, just some of the kind of photos. I think we've done some of that before. Again, we're talking about rehabbing the doors for the hangar. We're talking about these massive structure components. Talking about government building, site restoration, some things we've kind of walked through. Terminal modernization, replacing a lot of the millwork and redesigning some of the areas to really accommodate the newer technology and process that airlines use today versus when the terminal was first constructed. So that's all I had in the budget capital discussion. Happy to answer any questions.
A lot of material covered, thank you.
Yep.
So open it up for questions, comments.
Takes a lot to run an airport.
That's good team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, does anyone have any new business to bring before the committee today? Okay, hearing none, no exec session, so I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Ricky, we're good to go. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Right. I don't know if Glenn's here, you want to share any business from the.
I can do that.
Did Dawn reach out to you?
She did reach out, but it's, who wants to call Ryan up, me or you? I can call you. So, it's not a robust thing today.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry, welcome. Is there any public comment?
No, Frank, take the roll call.
Can I have a roll call?
Don Gottschall, Justin Grimshaw,
Here.
James Irwin,
Is he online?
Yep.
He was.
yes,
Yeah, he got it.
Ron Heckman, Frank Facciano,
Here?
Jonathan Strauss,
Here.
Christopher Worley.
Here.
We have a quorum and we have no public comment.
Well, then we'll move right into the approval of meeting minutes from last.
I'll make that motion.
Justin? John second? All in favor? Any questions? All right. Can you give us a capital projects update?
I feel honored you guys are fighting over this.
Yeah, that's good.
Here's a short straw.
Short straw.
All right, so we'll go through some of these updates pretty quick, but again, just to give a rundown of where we are. So we're looking to enter winter shutdown for the runway November 2nd, which is Saturday. But really, they're working on finishing some of the shoulder paving they're actually doing this week, right here, and then following up with some of the lighting behind it. Again, getting ready for the winter, as well as work to be done next year. So package 5, again, talked about it, shoulder work, see them putting in the lighting. We're really working on the grading again, just getting things ready for the winter so they won't have to come back and address any issues. Taxiway Alpha, as we've talked about before, working to get out the notice of award letters. We got the grants in place. Really going to be working on submittals to get that project started in the spring. Kind of getting the administrative paperwork component out of the way now. Talked about this in the other committee, but in terms of the Northside Logistics and Cargo Complex, really looking to actually start some additional survey and geotech that needs to be done, again, before the end of the year. Working with FHWA on the draft agreement, as well as PennDOT, and then continuing to have our monthly coordination calls with them, conceptual layout, conversations, again, with the developer and the consultants to keep all that moving. And again, working through some of the grant funding that we'll continue to update the committee on. So parking garage, parking structures we talked about. We did receive a draft proposal from AECom, reviewed that, sent some comments back, so we're waiting on the revised proposal before we know really what the price is going to be and where we're going. But again, still following same time frame. The biggest thing that we're kind of thinking and working through now is, again, we've talked about survey and geotech for cargo. A lot of our projects really have to do the same thing, and this one's no different. And the biggest impact is we got to survey the short-term lot. So we got to work through how we're going to coordinate that, which we've done it before. It's not easy, but again, it's something we just need to balance all the options of impacting, obviously, the parkers, the revenue, and getting, reducing the costs for the survey and geotech folks as well. So working through that. Building demolition for the government building. The demolition permit from the township has been received. We're waiting on the electrical permits, coordinating really with the contractor and the team of when we're going to start putting up some of the fences. So more to come on that, but we're really coordinating internally and with the contractor as well to get that moving as we've talked about. Air handler unit 4, similar. So permits are being submitted this week. We've had coordination meetings with 3 of the contractors in terms of some of the phasing. Again, we've talked about 120 calendar day construction. ANTP and the contracts were sent out this week. And then again, coordinating, most of the police station has already been relocated, so getting ready to get that project started as well. And again, updated picture of the air handler, taking a look at it yesterday, and it was making some noise, so it's good that we're doing this project. We talked about this last month as well. Really, in the next 2 weeks, they're looking to get started on paving the Hangar 7 entrance road. And then once after November 2nd, when the runway 624 construction is complete, we'll be closing runway 1331 to be able to do the paving around the runway as well. So trying to get all that done in November before the temperatures turn. Talking about this earlier with the electric aircraft. So Beta Technologies, really waiting on permits from the township. Really looking to start in the next week or two. I think next week they actually have a kickoff meeting with us, their contractor, and Beta, just to talk through the process and logistics, but kind of as an update, it's kind of on the end of the Hangar 10 ramp over here. So looking through that as well.
It actually gets even more interesting. We were talking about it before the FAA approved electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft on Tuesday as a new class of aircraft. First new class they've done since 1940 when they approved helicopters.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a number of years going through that, iterations on that.
Yeah.
So.
And the amount of capital going into that niche is large.
Huge.
Yeah. Toyota's put in almost $1 billion. Stellantis is the majority owner of Archer. You got a lot of money going in there.
A lot of different companies too. A
Yeah.
lot more than realized.
Yeah, and a lot of different versions of technologies.
Yep.
It's really interesting to see the different ideas about what those are going to look like.
Yep.
Is there going to be backups on the electric planes? Like, what happens when something goes wrong? I'm mean, I'm an electrician, I'm telling you, something's gonna go wrong. What happens when it goes wrong?
Yep, that's a good question.
Right, like, what's the backup?
Yeah.
The technology's not out yet, so they're still working on those kinds of things, yeah. Second battery, I don't know.
Most
that's a
of
lot of weight.
what you see is,
More
yeah,
weight.
yeah, so it's, whether it's for commercial use yet, that's gonna really drive the questions you have. But I think you'll see a slow phase in for private use, maybe to deal with cargo or parcel delivery, and then eventually get into moving people.
Then you had drone aspects to this as well. We had a conversation, that's got to be 4 years ago with Glenn Geisinger. And they were looking at some sort of a plan where they would essentially create corridors to allow drone freight traffic to go point to point. But it would have to stay within certain corridors so that it would be out of the way of everything else. And how does that potentially fit into this? Because this doesn't need a runway. So it gets really interesting. It'd be a little bit of time for it to evolve, but
Well, these guys, so you have the electric aircraft, which will use runway. So a little different than the EV.
what I was talking about,
right,
okay.
the vertical takeoff
Yeah.
stuff. So you have that blend of electric aircraft, which are out there already.
Yep.
And they're working on getting all their FAA approvals. So that's sort of the race for electric aircraft. And then you have the eVTOL, which is another
Yep.
new category, right?
And in the meantime, Microsoft and Amazon just took 2 of our nuclear plants for themselves for the next 20 years, so where are we going to get the juice from?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the biggest thing we'll be seeing too with, you know, the automation and autonomy, how that plays into everything, because that was, actually at a conference last month, they talked a lot about that, is the autonomy in the beginning is really more to help manage what the pilot has to do on their own versus completely replacing the pilot, because that's quite a ways away. Even if the technology's there, I think it's just more of a, you know, what are you comfortable with thing, at least from my perspective. So, moving on to Queen City, again, I talked about this last committee, but the vault was delivered this past week, really just coordinating with PPL to get that energized and up and running. But as we mentioned, all the lighting is complete. It's up and running, it's working really well. So we actually had a site visit with the FAA earlier this month to take a look at that as well, so that was helpful. Taxiway Alpha down in Queen City, again, we've talked about, again, working on that. So there it was, October 15th, we had a site visit with the FAA to look at that, talk about this project, work through some of the components there. So hopefully by next year, be in a place to get some grant funding depending on what the recommendation is for that project as well. And then again, moving on to Braden, really looking to start that design here by the end of the month, early November. Scheduling meetings with PennDOT to really walk through the timing and that project, again, as you kind of see there that we've talked about as well. And then really where we are with a lot of our capital projects, added some newer ones here, but then the one we're kind of tracking on the top, we didn't have a slide for it, we'll kind of keep the committee updated, is the first one, package 4. Really the work is done, as we talked about, we're just waiting on that final 11% of the grant funding to come in, so we'll track it here, but really nothing to update on that one. And then again, just been updating the projects. You can see, really as we're projects ongoing, these really want to be consistent with what we're spending, we're getting the grant funding, you know, in behind it, so kind of tracking that as well. I believe that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ryan?
Just a quick comment and question. So looked in terms of our contracts, we're hitting the numbers we've got in the contracts. We've not had any overages that I've seen. Construction costs stabilized?
I believe so. I think, you know, with some of the paving that we've got has been very in line. Consultants also do a good job staying in, you know, track of what's happening in the industry to update their estimates accordingly. But it seems like, other than, you know, probably some of the electrical components that we're going to deal with projects, we've been pretty good so far. And keep tracking that, really.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any new business for this committee? Do we need an executive session?
Nope.
All right, then let's call for an adjournment. Justin, we're adjourned.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll move on to the executive committee. So that would you call the roll, please?
Glenn Reevens,
Present.
Mike Zershik.
Here.
Frank Facciano,
Here?
John Hayes.
Here.
Paul Anthony. We have a quorum.
Any public comment?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 26th.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Second, B under the action items, approval of the Florida Purge Steinhardt invoices for September 2024. Motion for that.
Move.
Second.
Second.
Second, any questions on the invoices? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Third is approval to amend the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority's bylaws. What we're asking the committee to do is just to move this to the board meeting for Tuesday. So I'll take a motion to move the amended bylaws to the board meeting for Tuesday.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any questions?
Yeah, did we get any comments, further comments, Elizabeth?
There were not any.
Okay, good.
You think they're in good shape?
And
I thought so too.
if there's any discussion, we will entertain that on Tuesday board meeting. Okay, all those in favor of approval to move to the board meeting?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Steve, you're up.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our operations and safety update for this time of year, we focus in on some of the past stuff we've done and looking forward to the winter season. We talk about our 139 compliance inspection that was this last week of August. Once again, focusing on all of our pavements, signs, markings, the FBO, Darren's team, with their fuel trucks and fuel farm and all of our training records. Really 2.5 days of kind of the intense inspection of the airfield, including the fire department. It really just came down to the last 5 minutes of the last day. We found one missed maintenance airfield inspection from 3 months ago. So it's just kind of a paperwork error. Really complimentary to our whole team. The FAA comes here and expects to see what they see. You know, they spend time commenting that you can't buff the place up and make it look good a week before they show up. So our processes, our record keeping, all that stuff is just a culture that we've established here over the last 15, 20 years.
And I do want to add, I want to give credit to Steve, his team, but also all the operations and maintenance teams that maintain everything. This is a lot of work by an army of people, but
right, it's
you know,
not just
it takes a lot of oversight too. So thanks to Steve and his team, we continue to have really just phenomenal inspections, and we hear that back from the FAA, which is great.
Yeah, they laughed because last year, I heard that we had 3 inspectors last year, and I heard them talking to each other in the back of the truck, and they were talking about all the little stems for every one of the 5,000 lights we have out here. They're supposed to be yellow, and they were, you know, just chipping, fading, or whatever. Well, I told maintenance, I said, hey, when we start replacing bulbs, get some paint and just well, they noticed. They said, did we write you up for that last year? And I said, no, I heard you talking about it, so we're doing it. I actually had to send the maintenance department up to Napa to custom mix the color that matches, you know, it's just, so it's the buy-in.
You're not going to Home Depot buying can spray paint?
You don't have that yellow?
So it's the buy-in from the whole team, to Tom's point. It's just not me saying go do it. They take pride in what they do. So
That's a key point, because something little like that, it would be real easy for one of the crew to just say, yeah, it's not that big a deal. And then you end up in trouble pretty quickly.
I mean, because of the lack of rain, we're writing up.
See how yellow those are?
Yeah, see how yellow they are? So one of the folks that kind of grade what we're doing out there is our operations department, ops officer and our operations manager. Really vitally important for the safety of the airfield. They're the ones that go out and make sure that we're complying with everything we say we're gonna do. So, you know, nighttime, here for airfield safety during nighttime construction. So everything Ryan's been trying to do all the last 6 years on my runway, you know, we're out there looking at it, making sure it's safe for aircraft operations. A lot of, all those buses that come in and out of here for American, we're inspecting and meeting every one of those buses to make sure that they're permitted to enter the sterile area. Our emergency manager, Jennifer Bulgari, prime mover and director of our the exercises we performed here. We talked about our full-scale exercise in April. We had our airport emergency plan review and tabletop exercise in August, again, right before the inspector showed up. Matter of fact, he did attend that exercise. But, you know, gets our first responders in the same room. We know these folks, we talk to them, you know, kind of let them know what we're going to do. They'll understand what our capabilities are, what we expect from them if something bad were to happen here. So we talk about it, we kind of develop after-action plans to improve our emergency response here. About 104 participants from 43 different agencies at this year's tabletop exercise. Jennifer manages our airport operations center, so that's our 911 center, staff 24/7. Really trained for our airport-specific hazards. They provide direct dispatch to police, fire, operation, maintenance, custodial. So any of our stakeholders that have an issue, even life safety stuff, they don't call 911, which gets them Lehigh County. They call upstairs, which dispatches our first responders to any emergencies here on the airport. One of our CIP from 2023 into 2024 was the computer-aided dispatch, which brought our operations center kind of into the 21st century. We were documenting everything on Excel sheets and then filing it away. Well, we've kind of fully implemented this system, which is an online computer-based dispatching service, which kind of not only tracks calls, but gives guidance on, you know, if you get calls for an aircraft alert, we're doing this, that, and the other thing. So it kind of streamlines the process. But it's also allowed us to kind of develop data. So these are just dispatch calls from the operations center to our various departments since June. And it's already showing us benefits because we can see kind of, you know, Mondays here at the airport are pretty busy. And we had a lot of our staff here to be here every Wednesday. So we're kind of shifting schedules to meet that Monday demand. So we're looking forward to more information from this. Further development for next year is some of the automatic reporting to the police and fire records management system. So when there's an emergency and all the first responders are writing reports, they're doing a lot of cut and paste. They get an email, they're copying out of one, pasting it in another, and this system can be incorporated into their record management system. So as soon as the dispatcher hits enter, all the data that they entered goes into the first responders reports, and then they can put in their narrative. So it's really streamlined a lot of our processes.
What, in your opinion, what causes the higher number of issues on a Monday versus a Sunday? Besides probably more people, but.
I don't know if it's because they're maintenance calls. I mean, that's all data we'll be able to develop from here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Line through, but yeah.
Calls that they can't make on the weekend, they do on Monday.
It was really interesting the first time she posted this for us. Badging office, everyone in here has interacted with my badging office, Ronnie and her team. Really excited this year, we've implemented Air Badge, which is another online badge application process. Every one of us in the room with a badge that expires next May will be able to interact with the new system. It really allows badge applicants to apply online using their mobile device, their desktop, provide all that information to the badging office, schedule their fingerprinting. It's all, you know, all self-driven, really kind of streamlining our badging process. We're hoping that these three, I only got a picture of 2 of those file cabinets, will be going by the end of next year, or by the end of 2025. We're out of the paperwork business. So really excited about that. You know, obviously preparing to replace 1,800 plus badges next spring. And then monitor, you know, who's taking their site and security training, their driver training, and making sure that they're getting that completed, not only initially, but within 12 consecutive calendar months.
Steve, is there a reason that all badges renew at the same time?
It used to be pretty easy when we only had 500 badges, but starting, I think we've already started. We're no longer going on the everybody expires every 2 years. The TSA just extended that to 5 years. So we're gonna, after this rebadging, everyone's pretty much gonna expire 4.5 years in their birthday month. So when you're doing your recurrent training, you're, on the 5th year or 4th year, you'll have to get a new badge.
Okay, gotcha. Make sure you integrate into that process retirement benefits for board members that we get to keep parking next to the building.
Ronnie will sell you a spot for, I think it's $75 a year or something. Don't quote me on that, it might be $250. So yeah,
I like
we're,
75 better.
that's why I said don't quote. So we're really excited about the badging process, and it's cleaned up some of our processes. Like, if you're not in the system after 30 days, you're purged. Like this air badge, we used to have to go back and manually get rid of everyone's fingerprints, all their records if they were no longer employed here. As soon as we disable the badge, you're on a 30-day clock. And if you come back 31 days later, you're a new employee and have to completely start the process again. So it's been pretty exciting. Fire department, ARF, happy to have hosted our first junior fire camp in July. Probably the hottest week of the year, Colin, wasn't that? It was 105 heat index, so we were out cooking kids.
Didn't even have to light the fire.
Yeah, we didn't even have to light the fire. So 19 attendees over 2 days. Did some exercises, search and rescue. We had a pretty good time with that. More importantly, in addition to their annual required FAA burn we do every live fire burn that they do every May, we actually went down to Delaware to learn about the new fluorine-free AFFF. So we're in the process of converting our trucks away from the PFAS AFFF foam, and part of that is the learning process on how this stuff actually works. It functions a little differently than the current foam. So getting our team down there now to kind of understand it. That was a live diesel fire. Typically we use propane here for training, but they actually have a fire pit at that facility. Light it on fire, spray the foam, and kind of understand how it works. So it's kind of that important step forward as we transition away. Airport police ran through all of their MOPEC required annual recurrent training and manual in-service training. Coffee with Cops, they participated with Target over here at Target in June, so get out to the community. Stood around and greeted the shoppers there and kind of interacted with them. Planning our Shop with an Airport Cop for the first week in December. It's like 10 years time, I forgot the number. It's 10 to 12th annual Shop with an Airport Cop that we kind of bring in a whole bunch of the community to sponsor this and deal with the Catasauqua School District. And then everyone knows what time of year it is. Coordinating with all the alphabet soup, federal, local, state agencies to deal with any of the candidate visits here at Allentown. Quite a heavy lift from our group, not only police, but operations, fire, the whole team is here when this stuff is going on. Maintenance and custodial, we talk a lot about airside, landside during snow removal, but our airside maintenance group pretty much mowing, fence, lighting signs, any concrete work. Landside includes our custodial, but we do the HVAC, the carpentry, the bag belts, all that other stuff that you would, any city would do it as part of their facilities.
Remind me again what we're maintaining off the property. Don't we do some of the,
Some grass mowing
yeah.
off property, but we actually have on property outside of the fence storm basins that we maintain. We have maintenance folks that are trained in those. We're required to keep the water level as part of our FAA requirements.
And some of our property holdings to the north also contain sidewalks. So in the wintertime, we've got to keep those clean. So yeah, just sidewalk.
Would it be less expensive to jackhammer them out, or can we not do that from a code standpoint?
I don't think that's okay, but yeah.
But also responding to trees that break off during a thunderstorm in June that blocks postal roads. So, that kind of stuff. Planned maintenance where we had an oil leak on the transmission on one of the fire trucks. We had basically disassembled the whole truck to pull the transmission out. Water main leaks, Ryan talked about the paving. Well, that's, we're gonna have to repave that big hole we just dug over at the fire station to fix a water leak. Still working on that one. Blown up engine on one of the ops trucks. So, the guys are capable of completely disassembling a F-150 and replacing the engine. So, pretty talented group. Happy to have them here when they, when they're needed, they respond. Winter weather, well, we're preparing. We're gonna get the crew out to do kind of we call it the ride along and snow patrol rodeo, where we get out, exercise the equipment, talk to ATC so they're familiar with our snow boss, get airport operations out there, because the ops officers are the ones that kind of grade what we're doing while we're snow removing, so it's making sure that someone's looking at what's going on. And then talking to our stakeholders. So we've talked to, during our LNAA safety committee, but we've also talked to our LNAA stakeholders regarding our expectations and how we plan on addressing snowstorms. And everyone wants to know, well, I just printed this yesterday, but it was issued on October 17th. Really kind of what the National Weather Service is seeing short-term, December through February. Kind of like it's been the last couple of years, warmer through kind of early January, and then maybe, we get that couple of week period in January, February where it's really cold. The precipitation has actually shifted since the last time. There was a big dark green spot here that's kind of moved off the map. So I don't know if the current drought we're having, they're seeing continue, which is, maybe giving us hope that we'll get be a little bit warmer and less precipitation. But, middle of February, it's always going to be cold enough and wet enough to dump 32 inches at some point. So just don't know. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you.
Any new business? And there will be no executive session today. Will we have an executive session at the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll take a motion for adjournment. Thank you very much, and we'll see everyone at Heineken on Tuesday.